Hi, I'm Steve Clemons, and I have a question. Whether it finally signs a temporary ceasefire or not, what's Israel's endgame in Gaza? Let's get to the bottom line. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was in Washington for his third victory lap this year with U.S. President Donald Trump. There wasn't a lot of daylight between the two sides. Well, maybe a little bit on Iran, but the White House was pushing for progress in the indirect talks between Hamas and Israel. In those negotiations, the devil's really in the details. Much rides on how far Israel is going to withdraw from Palestinian territories during the ceasefire and whether it will sideline the Israeli-run food delivery system that's literally killing hundreds of starving Palestinians and concentrating them into areas where the Israeli army wants them to be. So whether a short-term deal is reached or not, what does Israel want to achieve? Can the U.S. trust Israel to stand by an agreement? And as the U.S. and Israel reshape the Middle East, where do the millions of Palestinians fit into the picture? And today we're talking with Gideon Levy, a columnist with the Israeli newspaper Haaretz, and the author of several books on Israel's occupation, most recently, The Killing of Gaza, Reports on a Catastrophe. Gideon, thank you so much for being with us today. Listen, I want to start out listening in on an exchange between Prime Minister Netanyahu of Israel and President Trump. Let's listen.
Do you think that there can be a two-state solution that creates an independent...
I don't know. I'd ask Bibi that question. You have the greatest man in the world to answer that age-old question, two-state. Go ahead. You give him your honest answer.
I think Palestinians should have all the powers to govern themselves, but none of the powers to threaten us. And that means that certain powers, like overall security, will always remain in our hands.
So, Gideon, did we just hear the President of the United States finally end the commitment to a two-state solution for Israel, and the Israeli Prime Minister being given the latitude to actually dictate that there would never be any real sovereignty in Palestine again? Is that the way you read it?
I think it is that long time ago. Now it was the official declaration of the death. And it has some benefits, I must tell you, because this masquerade, which lasts now for 20, 30 years, in which we all say there will be one day a Palestinian state, not today, not now, not with those Palestinians, with some other Palestinians, but one day it will be, while the settlers are taking over any piece of land in the West Bank, must come to its end. We have to face it. There will never be a Palestinian state, and we have to draw the conclusions and the consequences, namely to think about a different vision. Because continuing to speak about it again and again, you saw, I mean, the president looks at it as if it's a joke. He doesn't take it seriously. And you know what? He's right. There is no serious chance for a Palestinian state as long as the occupation continues, and above all, as long as the settlement project continues, and Israel has no intention to put an end to it.
Netanyahu has been on a roll with things, and I'm just interested, what is the alternative vision that I think many of you and your colleagues have about security? Have you not seen Netanyahu move Israeli security forward with these things? What is the biggest criticism of his security equation from your perspective?
By the way, I am not the ultimate critic of Netanyahu, and I really think quite different than most of my colleagues about him. But let's really answer your question, which is a very important one. What came out of all this? Whatever you mentioned was a real, enormous success. It can feed endless Hollywood films, the walkie-talkies, the bombarding of the bunkers in Iraq, the bombarding of the bunker of Nasrallah in Lebanon. Really wonderful action films. What do we get by the end of the day? What do we get by the end of the war? You really think that Israel is today a more secure place than 2 years ago? I don't think so, because you ignore the price. First of all, Israel is turning into a pariah state, and this is also one factor of security for a state. To be a pariah state makes it a very unpleasant place to be in, and also dangerous. Secondly, what did we achieve? With Iran, it's very clear now that Iran can still run for the bomb and maybe much faster now. So what did we get for all the destruction that we got here in Israel and the loss of people? What is the benefit for the long run? I mean, is Israel going to live on its sword forever? There's not one country in history which lived all its life only on its military power. And Israel will not be able to survive if it goes only to this direction. And right now, Israel believes only in military power. This has no future.
You said when we last spoke, right before the first ceasefire that was negotiated between Steve Witkoff, the envoy of the President of the United States, the Qataris, and Israel, that a ceasefire would be signed and then broken by Israel. And you were exactly right. That happened. We all saw it happen. Now we're back at another moment. And I have to tell our viewers that right now, as we're listening, Prime Minister Netanyahu is in Washington, D.C. He's been here for days. There has been no result as the time of this discussion here. But I'm interested in your prognostications again. Do you believe a ceasefire will be secured again? And what is your prediction about the solvency and durability of that ceasefire?
Netanyahu does not want this war to end. And therefore, my prophecy in our last conversation will be repeated now as the same prophecy. As long as he can continue the war, he will continue it. Will his motivation be whatever they will be? Many of his rivals say it's only for his political survival. I also believe that he has some ideology behind it. He really does not believe in any compromise with the Palestinians, any negotiations, any agreements, nothing, only living on the sword. But in any case, he didn't give up this war, and he will continue it as long as Donald Trump will let him. And therefore, I'm very concerned that even if a ceasefire will be achieved now, Israel will violate it again after getting back the first 10 hostages. Israel will violate it again.
Gideon, this seems to me to be just a very odd negotiation where I know Hamas is on one side of the table, I know the Qataris there, but this increasingly looks like an ego match between Trump and Netanyahu. And Trump is increasingly told, he wants to be the peace president, get out of all these conflicts, and every foreign leader that meets him, including Prime Minister Netanyahu, says, you ought to get the Nobel Peace Prize. And I'm just interested in how you see the ambitions and motivations of these two men. You just said that Netanyahu wants this war to go on. I think it's pretty clear Donald Trump may not care about Palestine, but he doesn't want this war to go on. How do you see the ambitions and incentives of these leaders right now?
First of all, you mentioned this idea of nominating Trump for Nobel Prize. Let me be very clear. The Nobel Prize Committee will never accept a recommendation of someone who is wanted for war crimes by the International Criminal Court. So if Netanyahu really meant to promote the nominee, he did only damage, because Netanyahu, and we have to remember, it is wanted by the International Court, the Criminal Court. And we tend to forget this. Now, their ambitions are quite similar, even though there are obviously differences. They are both populists. They are both not real Democrats, both of them not. They both are narcissists, as we know. They are both thinking, first of all, about their own career and about their own fate, the personal one. Now, Netanyahu wants the war to continue. Trump would like to see some kind of stability in the Middle East. If the war will not disturb this, he couldn't care less. I mean, as you rightly say, the last thing that interests him is international law, genocide, the transfer, the fate of the Palestinians in Gaza, the starvation, the mass killing. All those things really don't matter for him at all. He wants to have stability in order to go for his huge project. If it will disturb him, he will put a pressure on Netanyahu. Netanyahu wants the war to continue because he understands that nothing was achieved in this war until now. And like a gambler who goes to the casino and loses all his money, but he thinks if he will replay again, then he will make the big hit. Netanyahu thinks that what was not achieved in 21 months of mass killing will be achieved in another 21 months of killing, without having any clue what will happen then. I mean, let's say the ultimate victory is achieved. And what then? Who is going to run Gaza? Who is going to rehabilitate Gaza? Who is going to do all this? Netanyahu has no clue. So both of them, and this is the last comparison, both of them don't really care about the outcome. They are mainly interested for the short run, to show how big they are, how wonderful they are, and what heroes they are.
Gideon, Egypt has been putting forward a plan for Arab states to have a presence in Gaza to take over from Hamas. Do you think this has any chance of actually happening?
No, because Gaza is today such a beaten place with so much agony and pain, and really people lost their humanity there. I talked to some friends there. You must understand, they are after 19 years of siege and after 21 months of horrible war. What will the Egyptian force do there exactly? They have to first of all, to have a ceasefire, to have some kind of peaceful reality in order to start to think, and then they need their own leadership. Nobody can lead them. Why do we always think that foreign forces can lead other peoples? It never worked in history. You mean to change one occupation with another occupation? It will not.
When you look at the decimation, destruction, the killing, the death, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation now centralizing aid centers, and so many people being killed going to them, doesn't this become a self-fulfilling prophecy at one point, where even though ethnic cleansing is something that is abhorrent and it's a violation of the UN Charter, the world may let it happen?
The world may let it happen with one restriction. Nobody is going to take them. Nobody is going to take 2.3 million Palestinians. Nobody in the world will be ready to absorb them, and they have no place to go. And therefore, all the rest is totally irrelevant. I can understand this sentiment, let's relocate them and they'll have new life, with prosperity, all of them working in high tech, and they study medicine, and they will all start a new chapter in their lives. This is not realistic, because those people, I must remind ourselves, they are grandsons and great-grandsons of people who went through one relocation, who went through one ethnic cleansing in 1948 by Israel. Most of them are refugees from Palestine, from the place that I talk to you now from. They lived here before me. So they are still carrying the wounds of 48, and now you suggest them another relocation, another transfer. I really ignore the legal question, the moral question, but even in practical terms, where will they go?
Well, the defense minister of Israel, Israel Katz, has his own suggestion, which is not to export Palestinians, but rather to concentrate them into a camp on the ruins of Rafah, 600,000 Palestinians, after security checks, and not allow movement or for them to leave. Is this not what we saw happen to Jews before and during World War II? I mean, does concentration camps of this sort, which have now been proposed by the defense minister of Israel, not bring back haunting memories of the Holocaust?
How can they? The Minister of Defense of Israel, who is a total marginal figure in Israeli politics because all the real decisions are made by Netanyahu and only by Netanyahu, all the others are puppets, but the Minister of Defense by himself is a son of Holocaust survivors. I really would like to know what would his parents say when most of their families was exterminated. All the Holocausts in history started with evacuations of populations. The Jewish Holocaust started like this when the Jews were forced to move toward the east from Germany. The Armenian Holocaust started also by evacuation of masses of people. And then when you see it doesn't work, comes the next stage, God forbid, extermination. It repeats itself again and again. And it is unbelievable how Israelis, after the 7th of October, lost really any sense of humanity and any sense of self-awareness. Those are exactly the concentration camps of our parents and grandparents. What's the difference? The difference is only because in this case, cuts does not mean to solve the problem. He means to tyrannize those people in this humanitarian city, to tyrannize their lives so much until they will break and say and surrender and say, okay, take me out wherever you take me, to the Sahara, to other desert, just let me out from here, from this hell. This is not a solution. This is really a satanic idea. Those are human beings, you know, those are not sheep, and I wouldn't care, I wouldn't treat sheep like this.
How do you see this situation from Israel looking at U.S. politics? We've seen people like Senator Chris Van Hollen, Senator Bernie Sanders make the argument that the United States is complicit in what is unfolding in this, ongoing disaster in Gaza. I've had General David Petraeus on this show just say that, the claim that one can obliterate or wipe out Hamas is just specious, that there's no way, that Hamas is a brand, Hamas is an ideology, Hamas is not a list of characters. So when you kind of look at this and look at the long-term security side of this, but also what it's doing to, the American side of this equation, I'd just be interested in your perspective. I have to be honest, I've asked myself if Kamala Harris was President of the United States today, would this situation look any differently? And I'm really not sure it would.
I'm not sure either. And same, by the way, I can tell you about the Israeli alternative, the Israeli opposition. I'm almost sure that wouldn't it be Netanyahu, the same war might have taken place and the same crimes of war would have been committed. I'm not sure it's such a big difference between them. But getting to your question about the United States, right now we are facing a very totalitarian system in the United States. Namely, it's all about one man, Donald Trump. And we cannot rely on anything he says because he might change his mind from today to tomorrow. One day Zelensky is a friend, the next day he's an enemy, and then he's back a friend. You supply him with arms, you don't supply him with arms. It is not serious, with all the respect. It is not serious. And therefore, what Americans are saying is very important, but finally it will be Donald Trump to decide. And right now he seems to be fascinated by Netanyahu, which might change very quickly. Right now he gives him a carte blanche, a green light to do whatever he wants, supplies him with all the weapons. By the way, the Democrats supplied Israel with all the weapons in the world without any conditions. We have to remember it. Barack Obama signed on the biggest aid plan for Israel for years. There's not much difference when it comes to Israel between the two parties in the United States. Only the style is different. And I believe that Trump right now is a great blessing for Netanyahu. But as I said, it might change.
We're seeing the sanctioning of individuals at the United Nations by Secretary of State Marco Rubio and others for continuing to raise concern about the plight of those victims in Gaza today. And so there is a kind of thought control scramble going on in the United States. Israel seems to have a more robust debate than Washington does. Are you in agreement with that?
Absolutely. Basically, and I know it will sound weird to you, But basically, and especially after the 7th of October, Israel is speaking in one language and is holding one basic. It is true that Israel is divided today to two sects. One sect which believes that anything that Netanyahu does is holy and that he is God, no, not less than this, and he can do whatever he wants. They will stick to him. And the other sect thinks the opposite, that he is the Satan, and whatever he will do is wrong. Even if he will bring us peace and prosperity, he will always be accused by the other sect. That's the main argument in Israel. Netanyahu, yes or no. But when it comes to the war, the crimes, the apartheid, the occupation, the atrocities in Gaza, basically everyone supports it. There is one camp who wants to end the war, but only because of the hostages. We have to face it. They don't want to end the war in order to stop the killing of the Palestinians, in order to stop the destruction, horrifying destruction of Gaza. No, it's all about the 20 living Palestinians, Israelis, in captivity. I must remind you and your viewers that in every half an hour, no, I made the other calculation, yeah. In every 6 hours, there are average 20 Palestinians killed in Gaza for months now. Every 6 hours, 20 Palestinians are losing their lives. That's exactly the number of living hostages in the captivity of the Hamas. You know, it makes you think. I mean, obviously it's horrible, the story of those hostages, and they should be released, But by the time we are talking, another 20 people and another 20 people innocent, both are innocent, are killed. So Israelis changed so much ever since the 7th of October. Basically, almost all of them think that after the 7th of October, Israel has the right to do whatever it wants. And basically, most of them think that there is no room for any kind of humanity, mercy, pity, solidarity, empathy toward the Palestinians in Gaza. They don't interest most of the Israelis, and the media is collaborating with it by not showing Gaza at all. You know that in Israeli media, except of my newspaper, you will not see Gaza at all. Nothing. You will not see what you see over there. The average Israeli never saw.
Well, fascinating. We'll have to leave it there. Thank you so much, Gideon Levy, author and columnist with the Israeli daily newspaper Haaretz. Really appreciate your candor and for being with us today.
Thank you, Steve, so much for your wonderful questions. It was a pleasure being with you.
So what's the bottom line? On paper, the negotiations are between the Palestinians and the Israelis. But in reality, they're between the United States and Israel. So if the Palestinians in Gaza ever get a respite from the siege of starvation and demolition, bombings and killings, it's going to be a bank shot, an unintended consequence of bigger tectonic movements. Trump couldn't care less about Palestine or Palestinians, but he doesn't want forever wars, and he doesn't want conflicts using U.S. bombs on his watch, and he'd like to get some global applause for his actions. Netanyahu wants different stuff. He wants an ongoing conflict for a lot of reasons. But none of those reasons from either side have anything to do with fairness for Palestinians or resolving things in a long-term, stable way that actually works. And that's the bottom line.